You think you know where your story ends, until someone walks in and asks you to rewrite it. It's been 14 months since I buried my husband, and 9 months since my stepson asked me something that shattered the rules I thought I lived by. I wish I could say I said no, but grief doesn't make you pure. It makes you human, raw, exposed, needing something, anything to fill the silence. Grief isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It lingers in the stillness of the house, in the half-made bed, in the cup of coffee you make for someone who isn't there anymore. My husband, Richard. He wasn't cruel, just distant. Always had more to say to his work than he ever said to me. And when he died, it wasn't just him I lost. It was the version of me that existed beside him. I didn't expect Daniel, my stepson, to fill that space. But he showed up. He stayed. He noticed me. And one night, he asked me something that no son should ever ask. But he didn't say it like a son. He said it like a man. I didn't say yes. Not at first. But I didn't say no either. Because when you've been invisible for long enough, even the wrong kind of attention feels like light. That's how it began. Not with love. Not even with lust. But with loneliness, thick, quiet, and hungry. Subscribe now to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we don't just tell stories. We unravel the ones hidden deep inside the human heart. Stay with me, because what happened next, I still can't fully explain. But I'll tell you everything. My name is Camille. I was married to Richard for 15 years. He was strong, silent, the kind of man who moved through the world like a closed door, solid, dependable, but never easy to open. He wasn't unkind. He provided, protected, planned. But I don't remember the last time he looked at me like I was more than just part of the house. Our marriage wasn't full of fights. It was full of silence. And sometimes, silence is worse. When Richard died, it wasn't dramatic. No last words. No held hands. Just a phone call. Just a void. The funeral was quiet. Fitting, I suppose. Few people. Fewer tears. Everyone moved on, except me. And then there was Daniel, Richard's son from his first marriage. 21, quiet like his father, but softer, gentler, more present. We were never close. Not in the way that builds bonds. Just polite exchanges, short visits on holidays. Until Richard died. After that, he showed up more. At first, I thought it was duty. But it became something else. He started mowing the lawn without me asking. Fixing things around the house. Bringing in groceries. Sitting across from me at the dinner table like he'd always belonged there. I didn't question it. Because having someone around felt better than being swallowed by the emptiness. We didn't talk about grief. We talked about the little things. The weather. The mail. But underneath that, something else was building. I began to notice how long he lingered after meals. How he watched me, not the way a stepson should, but like a man watching a woman he hadn't figured out yet. One night, I reached for the salt. He reached too. Our fingers brushed. I laughed. Said it was nothing. But later, I found myself remembering that touch. I told myself it was accidental. That I imagined the pause. But deep down I knew. Maybe it was never accidental. Maybe the shift had already begun. And I didn't stop it. One night, after dinner, we ended up on the couch. An old movie was playing, one of Richard's favorites. He used to love silent films, the kind where the emotions were loud, even without words. The room was dim, just the flicker of the screen lighting our faces. We weren't touching. We weren't even speaking. But the silence between us, it wasn't empty anymore. It was thick. Aware. I reached for the remote. Daniel did too. Our hands touched barely. But it didn't end there. His fingers didn't flinch. They stayed. Pressed softly over mine. Warm. Certain. I looked at him, ready to smile and brush it off. But when our eyes met, he wasn't looking at me like a son. Not like a child. He looked at me like a man. A man who had already decided something. And then he said it. So quiet, like a secret meant only for that moment. You don't have to be alone anymore, Camille. I pulled my hand back, gently. Laughed. Not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. It was nervous, awkward, an escape. But inside me, something stirred. Not desire. Not yet. Something heavier. Recognition. He wasn't a boy anymore. He hadn't been for a while. And I was still a woman. Still breathing. Still needing something I had pretended to forget. I thought maybe it was just grief talking. Maybe he missed his father and confused that ache with something else. Maybe I did too. I tried to tell myself it meant nothing. That it was a fluke. That he didn't mean it the way it sounded. But the way he looked at me after that night, it told me everything. It wasn't confusion. It was intent. And the part of me that should have been horrified wasn't. I didn't want this. But I didn't stop it either. Because in that brief touch, I felt something I hadn't in years. Seen. I lay awake that night, just staring at the ceiling, thinking about his voice. The way he said my name. The way he looked at me. Was it just kindness? Or something deeper? Something I wasn't ready to admit. I turned it over in my head again and again, trying to convince myself that it was innocent. That he was just a grieving young man offering comfort to someone equally broken. But the truth? I hated myself for even wondering. Because the wondering meant I felt something too. And I had no right to. But here's the part no one talks about. Grief doesn't just make you cry. It makes you crave. Touch. Warmth. Connection. A reminder that you're still alive. Since Richard died, no one had looked at me like that. Not even before he died, if I'm being honest. Daniel didn't cross any lines. He didn't touch me inappropriately. He didn't speak with anything more than softness and care. But I started noticing how often he found reasons to be near me, how he lingered in the kitchen after dinner, how he'd stand a little too close when handing me a cup of tea. He started picking up groceries I hadn't asked for my favorite snacks, mentioning memories we'd never shared, bringing up little things Richard never noticed. And then one afternoon, I dropped a glass. It shattered on the kitchen floor, and I just froze. Because grief makes even the smallest things feel enormous. He came in, knelt down, and picked up every piece without saying a word. When he looked up at me, he said, "You're doing better than you think, Camille." And I wanted to cry, not because I believed him, but because I needed someone to say it. After that, the shift was harder to ignore. I'd catch him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. I'd hear his footsteps stop outside my bedroom door, then continue after a pause. And the worst part? I didn't stop it. I told myself I was imagining things. That I was reading into it because I was lonely. That it was grief making shadows where there were none. But then one night, I laughed at something, just a silly comment he made, and he looked at me and said, "You're beautiful when you laugh." And I didn't correct him. I didn't remind him I was his stepmother. I didn't pretend to be shocked or offended. I smiled. And that smile, that one moment, was the beginning of everything that came after. Everything changed the night the power went out. A storm rolled in fast, the kind that makes the air feel charged before the thunder even starts. The lights flickered, then went out completely. I found some candles, set them around the living room. The soft glow made everything feel quieter. More intimate. He offered to stay, just until it passed. Said he didn't want me alone in the dark. I didn't argue. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, wrapped in silence and flickering light. The only sounds were the storm outside and the way our breathing slowly synced without meaning to. We started talking. About Richard. About everything that never got said. He told me he wished he had more time with his dad. But then he paused and added, "I wish I had more time with you." I looked at him, unsure what to say. He didn't wait. He said, "I saw how he treated you. I always saw it. He never looked at you the way you deserved. Never really listened. I hated it. You deserved more, Camille." There was no anger in his voice. Just heartbreak. Not for his father. For me. Then, he reached out. Slow. Careful. Intentional. He took my hand. Not like before. Not an accident. Not a fleeting brush. This time, it was deliberate. He held it like he meant to, and I didn't pull away. I should have. Every thought in my head was screaming that I should. But my heart was silent. And that silence said more than any excuse I could have given. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch in any other way. But the way he looked at me, it was a crossing. A choice. One I didn't stop. His thumb moved gently over the back of my hand. And for a second, I closed my eyes. Just to feel something real. I wanted to tell him to leave. To tell him we couldn't keep doing this. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, letting him hold me in that small, unspoken way. When the storm passed and the lights flickered back on, he let go slowly. But the space between us was no longer innocent. He stood, said goodnight, and walked to the guest room like nothing had happened. I sat there for a long time after, my hand still warm where his had been. I went to bed that night with a storm inside me bigger than the one outside. And yet, the next morning, I made him breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee the way he liked it. I didn't say a word about what had happened. Neither did he. But something had shifted. And we both knew it. It happened on a Thursday. A quiet day. The kind that doesn't give you any warning. I was folding laundry near the window when I saw him pull up. He had flowers in his hand, white lilies, Richard's favorite. He stepped inside, said they were for the grave. But then, he held them out to me. You should have them, he said. You kept him grounded more than anyone ever did. I took them. I smiled. I didn't know what to say. He followed me into the kitchen while I filled a vase. The silence between us was familiar now, but heavier. I placed the flowers down, turned to thank him. He stepped closer. There wasn't any rush. No sudden move. Just closeness. Intentional. Unmistakable. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. And I didn't flinch. I should have. I should have moved. Should have said something. But I didn't. Then his hand lingered. Fingertips trailing down my jaw. When his lips brushed my cheek, I froze. Not out of fear, but because I felt wanted. Not needed. Not pitted. Wanted. He paused there, his breath warm against my skin. Waiting, giving me the choice. And for 1 second, just one, I let it happen. I let his lips find mine. Soft, hesitant. A kiss filled with everything we should have kept buried. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't planned. But it held every unspoken word we'd both swallowed for months. Desire, grief, confusion, guilt, all tangled into one moment that should have never happened. I pulled away first, shaking, ashamed. I couldn't look him in the eye. I turned my back, trying to catch my breath, trying to remember who I was. But then I heard him whisper, I've wanted this for so long, and something inside me shattered. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't sudden for him. This hadn't been a slip or a mistake. This had been building. Slow, quiet, intentional. And I had let it. I told him we couldn't do this, that it was wrong, that we had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My voice cracked halfway through the sentence, but I held onto the words like they could undo what already happened. He didn't flinch, didn't argue. He just stood there, staring at me like he didn't understand the rules I was trying to follow. Then he said, why? Not with anger. Just quiet confusion. You're not my mother, he said. You never have been. You're the only one who's ever truly seen me. And I didn't know how to respond. Because part of me wanted to scream, that's not the point. But the other part, the part that had been invisible for so long, clung to those words like they were a lifeline. I turned away before he could see the tears. Told him to go. He left without another word. and the house sank into silence again. 3 days passed. Then 4. No calls. No texts. Just emptiness. I convinced myself it was better this way. That distance would bury the mistake. That time would sand down the edges of that moment. But then, on the 5th day, he came back. I heard the knock, opened the door, and there he was. With her. A girl. Young. Bright-eyed. Clutching his arm like she belonged there. He smiled at me. Polite. Detached. Introduced her as his girlfriend. Her name didn't matter. Her presence did. She was soft-spoken, sweet. She complimented the house. Said she'd heard so much about me. I nodded. Smiled. Pretended. But he never looked me in the eye. Not once. He sat with her on the couch where we used to talk. Laughed with her in the kitchen where he used to linger too long. And I stood there, watching. Dying quietly in the space between memory and reality. That should have felt like closure. But it didn't. It felt like punishment. As if he wanted to erase what happened, by replacing me. And the worst part? It worked. Did I cross a line? Or did I just allow myself to feel something I had buried too long? Some days, I convinced myself it was a moment of weakness. Other days, I wonder if it was something deeper than that. Something older. Something that had been waiting quietly in the corners of my life. I keep wondering if Richard would be ashamed of me. If he'd shake his head in silence the way he always did. Or if, maybe, he would have understood. Understood what it feels like to be beside someone for years and still feel entirely alone. Understood what it's like to live in a house full of conversations that never really reached you. What silence does to a woman. I think back to all the nights I lay in bed beside him, pretending that the cold space between us was normal. That love wasn't supposed to feel like absence. So when Daniel reached out to me, even just with his eyes, it felt like someone had finally opened a window in a house I didn't realize had gone dark. It wasn't about him. Not really. It was about being seen. Touched. Chosen. Sometimes, grief doesn't make you noble. It makes you desperate. And in that desperation, you cling to whatever warmth you can find, even if it burns you. I don't know what that moment meant to him. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was confusion. Maybe it was just a misplaced echo of the love we both lost. But to me, it was a mirror. A reflection of everything I was afraid to say out loud. Everything I'd convinced myself I didn't need. And in that mirror, I didn't see a villain. I saw a woman who was tired of being forgotten. Have you ever made a choice, not because you wanted to, but because you didn't know how to say no? Not because it felt right, but because it was the first time in a long time that something actually felt at all? Was I wrong for letting that moment happen? Or was I just human, aching to feel seen again? I replay it in my mind sometimes. That quiet kiss. That look in his eyes. The silence that followed. Not because I miss it, but because it reminded me that I hadn't disappeared. Tell me, was it betrayal? Or was it just a cry for connection from two people left behind by the same man? Tell me in the comments. Because I don't pretend to have the answers. I only have the pieces, the moments, the choices I can't take back. And if stories like this stir your soul, if they make you reflect, make you feel less alone in your own questions, then like this video and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. Some people come into your life to heal you. To help you breathe again. To offer light in a time you forgot how to ask for it. Others, they don't come to heal. They come to reveal. To show you the cracks you tried to cover. The emptiness you learned to live with. The ache you've been calling normal. What Daniel and I shared, it wasn't love. It was loneliness, dressed up in borrowed affection. Held together by grief. Lit by the spark of unspoken need. And yet, a part of me still wonders. If I were given the chance again, would I say yes? I don't know. And maybe that's the hardest truth of all. Be careful who you reach for in the dark. Sometimes, they don't pull you out. Sometimes, they pull you in. Deeper than you meant to fall.